Excellent. So welcome to Wednesday night St Martin's Guild training session. I'm really pleased tonight to welcome Jon Bint to talk to us exploring Devon Call Changes, which I think for those of us who have heard Devon Call Changes before, I think this is going to be a fascinating insight into such a wonderful tradition, I think, and I think quite different for us. I'm going to introduce Jon tonight. Jon rings at St Michael the Archangel in Chagford and has done since 1976. He's currently the tower captain and has been in the past the Devon Association of Ringers' first publicity officer. Jon has good links with Birmingham. As a mature student, he enjoyed 3 years with us at the university, graduated in 1997, and was Master of Busker in his first year, and in fact trained sort of fellow members ringing whilst there. He rang his first PL treble to Cambridge Major in a bit of a cultural exchange, and then rang the tenor to Grandser doubles in his second and third year as part of Busker. At his time, Busker won the NUA, something that the guild I was part of never managed to do. In his working life, he's with a local quarry, crushing rocks, driving shovels and tipper trucks. All sounds very, very hardcore and very exciting, and then has followed subsequently 4 years as a water quality sampler. He's been a builder's labourer, trained to work as a secondary school music teacher before returning to truck driving. Jon has 4 children, and 2 of them, have got that right, Jon? 2 of them ring?
Yeah.
And you're currently teaching your youngest, is that right?
Yeah, we had another session this evening, yeah, earlier on.
And I know Jon has just become a grandfather for the first time. So, Jon, welcome to St Martin's Guild, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Nice to be back in Birmingham. I was just looking around to see if there was anybody still there, but it was 97 when I left, so I'm not sure that anybody is, but I don't. I could see Nikki on the screen there over in East Anglia as well, and I think I got one at least. One of ours on there. Devon Call Change ring, and I think the best thing to do is just to get our ears straight into it. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of ringing. That was just a little clip just to get your ears tuned in. The great Egg Buckland team who are at the top of the tree for many years, actively a young side compared to some in the Devon Call Change tradition. That was them just rising on their own peel then in Egg Buckland down in Plymouth. I just want to begin this evening with just really looking at putting a whole thing into context. I think over the many years of bell historians have always looked at it from the wrong angle, in my view, right up to the present time. I expect you'll, some of you reading the ringing world will have seen a series of articles by Dr. Eisel there last year. And really interesting and some great research, but he still missed, to me, the most important point, even in the second sentence of the first edition. It's this sort of historical equivalent of missing an open goal, I would have said. It says his history is particularly difficult as, unlike half-pull or scientific change ringing, there was no tradition of keeping records of what had been rung, and we have to rely on clues, generally embedded in the reports, to build up an overall picture. Well, the reason for that, and this is how I want to come at it, is Devon Call Change tradition is an oral tradition, in other words, a folk tradition, which explains the fact that nothing really is written down by its very nature. Whereas the scientific world is a book learned tradition, if you like, an educated one. I tend to come at things obviously as a music graduate. I'm coming at it from a musical perspective as much as anything. And if you want to draw a parallel, you could say that the scientific world is the classical music, if you like, as opposed to the Devon Call Change tradition, which would be jazz or folk. Or if you want to look at, say, the classical, the scientific tradition as sort of English church music, then you could say that Devon Call Change ringing is the sort of gospel music of it, if you like. You know, Bach, that could be your Stedman, Mozart, your Grandser, Tippett, your Reliance Maximus, Mahler, your Splice Surprise, perhaps. On the other hand, the Devon Call Change ringing, well, round ringing, ring the bells up, perhaps ring some changes, ring them down. So, you know, a much simpler thing. You could even go to the extent of saying, perhaps somebody like Yehudi Menuhin, you know, a great ringer, and we've got some down here as well, and I've been privileged to ring them, you know, in the scientific world. Or on the other hand, you could say, well, in the Call Change tradition, you could have some equally great ringers, but perhaps the Stefan Graffellis of this world. So that's how I want to look at it. You know, it's a different tradition. It's not a question of one being better than the other. They're two different sorts of music. Okay, and the background, well, obviously it has a common root, but we know from well, this is familiar stuff to many, I should think. The first ringing text, the Duckworth one, I can never say the word, Tintinologia. And he talks, you know, in what, about 1660 something, about how only in the last 50, 60 years, you know, changes weren't been known to rung and blah, 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 blah. And then he sets off on all these other things. And then you come up to the next one shortly afterwards, Stedman's book, the Campanologia, isn't it? That's right. 1677, and really you can see an early parting of the ways, if you like. Here's a bit from Stedman in 1677. He talks about rising the bells. That's right, yeah. Since the ringing of changes requires the peal of bells on which the changes are to be rung to be first raised up to a set pull, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes on to say, and to speak the truth, most practitioners are in these days somewhat deficient herein. The ringing of changes have generally diverted the learner's fancy from the practice of raising, round ringing and ceasing, by which means we have, in one manner, lost one excellency in the pursuit of another. So you can see that this goes back a long way, really, and things have moved on quite swiftly in the scientific world, as we know, with you know how things progress with regards to peels and methods and everything. More revolutionary, whereas down here it's more of a slow evolutionary process, I would say. So going, you know, it's fairly well embedded back here. Now, coming on a little bit further, well, you get to the 1700s, and probably like John Scott, the late John Scott down here, who probably forgotten more than anybody who know about the history of Devon bells and ringing. We had, you know, the same across the country. We had this burst of activity, didn't we, of a lot of the lower numbers being augmented, recast, in the mid 1700s, and it was the same down here. Well, clearly the driver down here wasn't that we wanted to be ringing more complicated methods, because there wasn't any. So it is something else that was driving it down here, and I think most of the bells probably then went Sally way, you know, hung so they could probably ring them both. Now, the early round ringing competitions, of course, that's the time when it really starts pushing on. In the 1700s, we got some. Where are we? Just got to try and find it in amongst here. Yeah. we've got another little bit here in the Campanalogia about the rising and the lowering in here, if I can just find it. Bear with me. Okay, so we go on here. He's still talking about the practice of ringing. The truest way of raising a peal of bells, according to the best of modern practice in 1677, is as quick as it may be. And really and truly, that's the case here still now. I think if I can just go back to the beginning of that egg buckling clip, you can hear how rapidly we tend to go up. I think there's a bit of bird song first. So it's a fairly swift thing. Obviously, there's a key difference there. You recognise us all pitching in all at once instead of the sort of 1 1 2 1 2 3 thing. I think they call it Bristol fashion. Have I heard that right? Oh, I've just seen Richard Jones there. Sorry, I think I've just yeah. I've got to give Richard a ring. Lovely to see you. Yeah, yeah. So get the rise is really pushing them up quickly. And if you go back to this old Campanalogia, again, he goes into a bit more detail, and the similarities are remarkably similar, I have to say. But let's push on quickly then to the sort of the how and the why, as much as the when, really. Why did it happen? Why has it happened down here? Well, I think there's several things here that you're looking at. Obviously, geography is going to play a part in it. We are, I won't say down in the arse end of the world, not at all. I mean, but we are that little bit far removed. I expect Brittany's probably just as close as London is to us. And in this day and age of motorway travel, it's hard to appreciate just how sort of isolated it was here. You've got with the Black Downs and the Somerset levels, but even today, if you come down to Devon on a train, either with the Waterloo line or with the on the Paddington line, you still come through a tunnel either way, and there is that barrier. So we were cut off down here a little bit, I suppose. Obviously, we're at the opposite end of the country from where all the scientific ringing was developing in London and East Anglia and other places up there. So that's got to be a part of it. You could look also perhaps at the weight of the bells. If you go next door to Somerset, we all know there's some mighty metal there and mighty towers housing it. It's not the case here. By and large, you go across Devon, there's a lot of 1000 weight sixes, if you like, so or fives and sixes, as it perhaps before the augmentations. So the bells themselves lend them to rising, as you heard egg buckling there, in a particular way, which perhaps isn't quite so easy on a heavier set. Telling about sets, that brings me just another thing came to mind there. Another little difference about the two traditions, if you like. All the years I've been learning, I never heard really, in my earlier years in particular, I never heard a Devon Call Changes side referred to as a band, which you're always obviously familiar with. And I always think, well, a band is more down to a group of individuals. Devon Call Change always historically they referred to them as sets, but as teams, and it is very much a team event. And again, so the individual is not so evident. Yes, the individual has a certain role, in particular, within their place within the team. Whereas if you contrast that with the scientific world, it's very much an individual thing about what can the individual ring, and the names are published on the peels, and everybody's familiar with a good many, well-known ringers and that. So little things like that all add up to make quite a big difference. But they're subtle things. So what else have we got? Well, we've looked at the sort of when, Dr. Eisel's articles, that there's some dispute about when the call changes sort of come in, and obviously it all starts off with the round ringing. That's not so, nobody's ever going to know exactly when, what anybody says, being a folk tradition, like I said, it wasn't written down. But they do, the peals sort of bear this remarkable resemblance to the earlier ones that you get in the early ringing texts. How did they get here? Well, nobody's really ever addressed that, have they, in the bell histories? To me, one obvious way would have been the bell hangers, particularly, from outside the county. Yes, we got our own bell hangers down here, the Penningtons and the Bilbys of this world. But ones coming in, Ruddle and folk coming in from further up the line, if you like. Would they have brought it? Well, who knows? That seems to me one place, or invention on the spot. They're not mutually exclusive, I don't think. But certainly by the 1800s, in the early 1800s, the call changes are coming in, as well as the continuing the round ringing tradition. The round ringing tradition in Cornwall persisted, up into my ringing lifetime. But I would say in the last generation, I think it's pretty well died out. I don't think you get the round ringing competitions like you used to, that I can vaguely remember. And I've had visitors come to Chegford or Drew Stainton. I'd certainly from Cornwall, and they'll come in and ring the bells up, ring rounds, and ring them down again, without any changes. So it's sort of still there, but probably as good as gone, really. So what else we got to look at then? Let's have a look. The interesting time, I think, really comes in the 1800s. By now, the call changes, the round ringing competitions and the call change competitions are really well embedded, obviously, down here. And then you get this whole church reform thing, and that's where it all starts kicking off. And I think the harder folks push, perhaps West Country folk, I think the more they dig their heels in, maybe. A little bit like it. So it's the battles of the 1800s that they're fascinating when you go back to the things like the Bell News and all the very barbed comments. Some of them are subtle, some of them are anything but subtle. There's one in Troit's. There's a lovely little one here. Troit's change ringing. This is 1869, I think, the first edition. He's got to have a go at them. It is a most laughable thing to see Devonshire round ringers ringing call changes. On the word treble to second, 5 to third, you will sometimes see all ringers, tenor man and all, give a jump as if they had been shot, and turn their old bodies round to stare and glare at the man after whom they are ordered to pull. It would make a 5,000 hardish work if this were necessary. And so it goes on. You get plenty of that, but then they railing against all the competitions and everything down here. So, like I say, that's really well embedded, and I think the Gimshire ringers, I think it was one of the first, if not, I think it was the first. They founded this, and really it was this mission to rid the county of ringing competitions and install or bring in a higher class, if you like, of ringing, to improve behavior as well, it has to be said. It really was a missionary sort of thing, and that's sort of quite clear. I mean, they actively sending out people, trying to give demonstrations of things, but it was never really going to take hold in such a vast county, when you got so few trying to keep going. Once a sort of demonstration had happened, perhaps. The call change ringing world did start to get organized itself then in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I think there was a Tamar Valley Guild, was probably one of the earlier ones, and then a South Devon association in the sort of Newton Abbot, King Stainton area. And by then the ringing for prize money had gone. But it's interesting to see in some of the early certificates, I think there's one off the top of my head down High Week down to Newton Abbot, where the prize, the actual value of the prize is mentioned to the value of £50. So that was still sort of important there. But certificates then obviously replaced prize money. But just taking a step back again, I just want to pick up on the mention about the oral tradition. I think what really also helps confirm this to me is the existence of a whole group, if you like, of ringing songs, and some of you be familiar with them, no doubt, but that so many have survived makes me think that probably one or two haven't, you know, but it's quite likely, you know, again, folk music, that there's going to be some lost. Probably the most famous one, obviously, is the one everybody's familiar with about North Loo, and the men of North Loo, and they were ringing against the guys from Broadwood Widger, that is. And of course, then there's the Eggless Ale ones, probably the next most famous one. Interestingly, the Eggless Ale one is there's actually two tunes of this, two versions of it. I don't know if I got him here somewhere, I think. One of major key, and the other one is in a minor key. Again, it shows that with the folk thing, nothing is set in stone, and folks might remember the words of something, and then they might have to make up a different tune or something. It's this whole thing of not being written down. The more well-known one, come all you jovial ringers, come listen to my tale. I'll tell you of 5 ringers bold that lived in Eggless Ale. That's the more well-known one, and there's a minor one, I think something like come all you jovial ringers, come listen to my tale. I'll tell you of 5 ringers bold that lived in Eggless Ale. So it's the same thing. To show that carries on in the same way, there's a song about the Torrington ringers. Good ringers be we that in Torrington dwell, and what that we are I will speedily tell. And I've heard a newer version of this, again, that somebody in the present time had passed on the words and they couldn't remember the tune. And if you go online, you'll find it. It's Becky Driscoll and Nick Week, is W-Y-K-E, and I think Nick's mother, I believe, is a ringer up around Torrington Way, and it's a lovely version of it, a lovely reworking of it, and once you hear it, it gets in your head quite a bit, I have to say. But I'll let you explore that one, see if you can try and find it. The Ringers and Ringers, like I say, he's online. I went there the other day and had another listen to him. There's another one, not such a good tune, probably the reason why it's not so well known, which is about the Ringers of St Dominic. Remarkably similar. These sort of songs, they tend to list all the ringers in turn. This kind of goes counter to what I was saying about the team event. But often, it gives a good indication of the type of person that they were. Usually they're cordwainers and things like that, and little tradesmen and things like that. The St Dominic one, only got a team of 6 there. It goes to 6. I think the Torrington one off the top of my head is 6. Eggless Ale was 5. But nowhere else do you find this. So again, it emphasizes this whole folk thing. Another thing that was sort of contemporary, if you like, to when all the missionary work of the Devonshire Guild of Ringers was going on, was this collecting of folk music that was going along, not only down our way, but elsewhere. But we had Reverend Baron Gould was doing it around these parts. And I think it's interesting that he makes this point here, or just a little bit from the foreword of his Songs of the West here, about how he used to, or where he used to collect the songs from, these folk songs. Then he tells about mines and quarries. And then he says about the fetching at the mines and quarries. That's right. Men left work early and went to the change room. Stone jars of ale were brought thither from the nearest public house. Each man filled his mug, and in each in turn, before emptying it, was required to sing. On such occasions, many an old ballad was to be picked up. There was also the farm supper after harvest, at which the workmen sang. Now the suppers have been discontinued, and here's the most important part for us. It says, ringers' feasts, happily, still remain, and at them a good old ditty may be heard. So really emphasizing this whole sort of folk tradition amongst the ordinary working folk. And he goes on to tell about a lot of the folks that he collected the songs from were illiterate, certainly not musically trained or anything. So it really goes to emphasize, like I said, what this is all about. It's very much a folk tradition. It's an oral tradition, and it should be seen as alongside the scientific ringing, to my mind, two different sorts of music. Like I said, too much in the past has been made of this whole thing of trying to say one or other is better than the other. They're just two different sorts of things, and you can have good ringing in both traditions. Let's be honest about it. And that's the way to my mind that I've always looked. I always looked at it, and it would be nice if everybody would sort of think along those lines. I think because appreciate the best out of both worlds. The present day, and a little bit nearer to the time, the Devon Association Ringers was was when the Call Changes Ringers really got organised. There's an interesting, I think, an interesting bit of research to be done there. I don't think it's quite so straightforward as just the Call Change Ringers getting organised. When you look at the first judges of the first competitions, this is about 1924 and 25, right in the heart of Red Devon, around the North Taunton area, sort of around there, and Zilm and Akram. And you've got a couple of the judges were actually from the guild, and they got censored for a while, because I think there was a rule back then that nobody in the guild should have anything to do with competition ringing. And one of them was a well-known North Taunton ringer, Mr. Fewins. But interestingly enough, the fourth judge, and it would be a familiar name, was Cyril Johnson. He of Gillett and Johnson Bell founders. And anybody that's read I read is it the biography? Was it by his daughter or something? He was an interesting fellow, Cyril Johnson, wasn't he? And I think if you speak to those that have worked at Whitechapel and those at Taylor's, I think his sharp business practices are well known. I think, and I think, to my mind, I think there's something to be found out there. Why did he suddenly pitch up in Devon at that point? Well, just go around and look at who's recast some of the bells around about that sort of time. So it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting line of inquiry, shall we say, as to the foundation of the association. Anyway, in true association style, again, it's emphasizing the folk tradition. Although these first competitions started in 1905 and annually through, it wasn't until 1930 that the association was really formalized with rules. Now, during those 5 first years, it started off, if you look at the first certificates, you'll see it's down as the Devon Association for the Encouragement of Change Ringing. Of course, I know you'll understand that change ringing would normally be taken to be scientific ringing. So sure enough, a couple of years later, you see, say about 1927 or so, the certificates changed ever so slightly, and it's now Devon Association for the Encouragement of Round Ringing. That went on for another couple of years, and by 1930 they have the first official meeting, and that's where the rules, such as they are put down, and it becomes the Devon Association of Ringers. So that was 1930, and then the competitions annually, and within the first couple of years, there was already aggravation. I think one team lowered a bit too quickly under time and got disqualified. So then a few of the others got the hump, I think, and they boycotted the competition the next year. But so that's the way of it. The Dem Association ringers, the only body to now really to specifically represent another tradition. In Cornwall, there used to be the East Cornwall Association of Ringers, and I think it barely exists in name anymore. And that's where the difference occurred across the Tamar, because the Truro, the Diocesan Guild, they sort of subsumed as far as I understand it, the East Cornwall Association of Ringers, and it became the sort of what was the East Cornwall branch, and then they still do their winter league, I think, of the call change competition. And that's about the extent of it now. No pun intended. I think down around St Column and that, I think folks like Phil Tremaine would be a good port of call down there to get the present scene of any change ringing in Cornwall. But we have the two separate bodies, and the Devon Association has got its own ringers hymn. Now, Devon ringers would say that maybe this is a Devon ringers hymn. Well, I don't know that it exactly is, because if I can find a copy of it, there he is. This was I don't know if he was a ringer or if he was the organist down there. The tune of it is called Tavistock. Well, this was the time when Tavistock was an association call change tower. I mean, it isn't the case now. Mr. Campbell Grills, and I don't know if it will show up on there. There it is. And a hymn for ringing festivals. Well, this one's got an interesting tale to it, and again emphasizes the old nature of the Devon Call Changes tradition. And I got a lovely letter here from some years ago from Colin Adams, who's the captain of Exminster. By the way, if you want to see somebody lower 8 on Exminster, he's probably one of the best, if not the best, treble ringers, I reckon, for lower an 8. Colin, he does a wonderful job. So anyway, Colin said to me, this was lovely. He's obviously in his time as secretary. He got to know a lot of the old boys, all dead and gone now, really, and many of them. But there's a lovely story about this ringers hymn. The ringers hymn. This was composed by the late George Campbell Grills of Tavistock. And Colin says, I do believe he was the regular organist, but I don't know. And he composed this piece, around about 1947, anyway. And he said, I think the minute book contains a record about this hymn being adopted by the Devon Association and used for its festivals, and that it will be known as the Ringers Hymn. And he says, I remember speaking to the late Courtney Thorne. He was at Colebrook. I remember speaking to the late Courtney Thorne about this, and Courtney told me that he was present when this was proposed, when the proposal was made at the Devon Association meeting at the Ring of Bells, North Taunton, where meetings used to be held. I did go to a ringing meeting there. It's all shut down now, that pub. Tommy Darch, a notable ringer in the world of Devon Call Changes ringing, he hailed from Torrington. He apparently resisted. It's like a scene out of you can imagine this, a scene out of Thomas Hardy, and some of the earlier meetings when I went to when I was publicity officer, it really and truly it could, say it was still like Thomas Hardy. Then I looked around, I thought I had a bit more colour in my hair then, by the way, and I looked around, and if the blokes had any hair at all, most of them were Snow White on the top, and it really was lovely. But things had changed a little bit now. Anyway, he said, I remember speaking to Courtney Thorne about this, and Courtney told me, yes, that's right. So anyway, Tommy Darch apparently resisted giving his support, saying that he would like to hear the piece first. Only a few people in Tavistock haven't heard it previously. Well, according to Courtney, George Campbell Groves then sat down to the piano, and Tommy Darch accompanied him on his violin. And after a couple of runs through, those present joined in with the singing. And at the close, Tommy Darch signaled his approval, and everybody else fell into line. So I think it's a lovely tale, but I think it kind of epitomizes the way that things were done down here then. and even in my time on the association committee, you know, we had one or two very, shall we say, very strong personalities, and they seemed to spend most of their time trying to, you know, rubbish. Dave Trout on the Egg Buckland captain there, he's quite fiery, and but he was one of the younger generations. But him and some of the older ones, Mervyn Phillips, he's then gone up North Devon, and Ivor Hookway is another one, and they'd be at each other like, oh, I don't know what they're like, but yeah, you know, you just think, well, they're going to get any work done here, but anyway, so that's your I think that sort of really sort of tells something about the history of it. I haven't got a clock here, so I'm going to clue what the time is.
It's 20 to 8.
Oh, all right. So we better hear a little bit about what the actual thing involves. What makes the difference of it? Well, thank you for the time check as well. The legendary long Devon ropes. Well, yes, we all know about them. They're not quite so prevalent now, but you get all sorts down here. Again, it's a folk tradition, so you're not going to get two exactly the same, because, you know, folks make them up as you go along. I've been out, I think it was North Lure, I went out once, and they just come down in a single rope, and there was a little knot on the end. But what I've got here, and again, I shall offer it up to the screen directly. The classic Devon rope, yes, they don't like, you know, we don't like a lot of double rope, and the reason for that obviously is the Devon style of handling, you know, so it goes against all the instructional videos, I'm sure, from the Central Council, but we do things our way because it's a different style of things. In the same way, perhaps a jazz musician is going to handle their instrument differently to a classical one. So what you got here, I just see, there it is. Look, there it is. There's a Devon. Oh, that's right. There is at the end of a Devon rope is often like that. Let's come that way because the rope hangs that way, doesn't it? There you are. And there's a lovely splice there coming down. I'm cutting off. Anyway, now you can see he ends up there, and with an eye splice, I think that one's called, isn't it? Where is it? I think it comes back on itself there, and then just onto a single rope, and so on and so forth. Now, you're used to, you know, perhaps mostly where the rope tucked up at the end, and quite a bit more double rope. Now, we don't like the double rope because obviously, you know, we're running our hands through it. This is particularly important for the rise and the lower, and the control, and how we can control the striking on the rising and the lower in so much. But going back to this one, the classic way, and again, this is the big no-no, I know, but the classic way for a Devon ringer to take up the rope, there it is. You got to see it, the hand through the loop on the end. And that's how, you know, that is old school Devon ringing. And then you'd have the extra long ropes where you turn them around at probably a coil or two in your hand as well to take up the Devon rope. So there it is. So, you know, we do it. I know some of us still do it. So that's the tools of the trade, if you like. So South Taunton, if you want to see it, the South Taunton there, they've still got mighty long ropes. I mean, that's proper old school over there still, just down the road. So yeah, the ropes are different, you know. And the reason being, like I said, you know, the running the rope through the hands, which is particularly important on the rising and the lowering. The other thing, of course, the big one is the closed hand stroke, isn't it? Yeah. Now, it's about the sallying, and the sally is so important, you know. And again, if you go right back to the Stedman book, there I think he tells about sort of pinching them. Really work the sallies quite hard on the rise and the fall, because we want to keep the tail end up. I'm speaking from my own experience after the 3 years up in Brum. I loved it. I love the place. I'm still very fond of it. You'll be pleased to hear. And chalk and cheese, obviously. But well, I've just lost my thread there. Yeah. Yes, the sallying. I felt that when I was sort of learning a bit of scientific, and I had to examine my handling, and to the extent that now I ring one way to handle the bell one way when I'm ringing Devon ringing, and I change the handling when I'm ringing the scientific ringing. It partly helps my brain to switch from one to the other. But I found, you know, we tend to put a little bit more on the sally, obviously, because we've got to keep the sally, you know, close the hand stroke in. But it's not just so much for that. It's about keeping the tail end up. And we've had visitors a year. And quite recently, I think, I said, but if you can work around that, perhaps you can, you would ring after the wedding for us. So fair play to them. They said, oh yeah, all right, we'll do that. And it came to, so the first peal that they rung after the wedding, the bride was going out, they thought they'll ring Queen's, Devon style. And they were ringing them, and they were getting faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And then that's the other reason the other thing I found, it tends to be, it's almost like the pull is turned on its head. There tends to be much more emphasis put on the driving the tail end or the backstroke, I think you call, driving your ends to make the sally stand, to get your open hand stroke. And I think that kind of contributes. Everybody's so worried about pushing them on because they know Devon ring is a little bit quicker, but I think again that's exaggerated. The key thing, one of the key secrets is this work on the sally to keep the tail end up, and obviously you're looking for the complete symmetry because you haven't got this empty beat at the sally stroke. So that's my take on that one. What else do we want to know about the actual ringing? I mean, like I said, there's
sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, I think probably a good time. Yeah.
Could you just describe for us again, perhaps for some of our members who might not know what Devon Call Changes is? What if I were ringing Devon Call Changes with a band or a team? What would I expect to happen? Obviously, you played us the clip of it, but what? Yeah.
I mean, well, obviously from the bottom upwards. I mean, the classic thing, and I go on tours like it, and been on tours like it. Every single peal you get on to ring, you ring them up, ring some changes, and ring them down again, and then you go in again, ring them up, and so I'd stress this: the rising and the lowering. This is another key difference, and the rising and the lowering is, I mean, it's intrinsic to the tradition. It's whereas we know that the rising of the bells, for scientific ringing, it's a means to an end. The bells will be got up because primarily it's there. You've got to have the bells up to ring the method, but that's just because they got to be got up. So it's a means to an end. Here, it's an end in itself. It's an intrinsic part of what's done. The rise and the lower, which I mean, another reason for it, going back, is to think that back in when they were collecting these folk songs, and when Ellicott was writing his Bells of Devon, again they were sort of contemporary, the back end of the 1800s. Well, even then, there's very few. Ellicott makes that point, going around the towers, there's many of them without stays and sliders, so you've got to ring them up, ring them down each time. So, I mean, that's another key reason for the tradition, being as it is down here. But yes, at the actual, you'll hear on the, I can just ping the egg buckle, well, you heard it just then, the egg buckle and rise all in together on the third pull. So you'd be ready on the third pull, go. So the first one, just to give them a jit to get them going. The second one, just let them swing gently and then run them in. Egg buckling, particularly good. Style of musical ringing, I always thought, listening to them outside, to my ear, I could tell Egg Buckland. They run them in beautifully there. It's a bit like a stick down the railings. You want to hear all the bells. Some other teams come in a little bit too fierce, bang them in all in a little bit too much together. But Egg Buckland, you just want to hear them running down there. So you hear that. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 gap, and then the small ones will start doubling. Obviously, you've got to get the trebles up, get some rope out opposite the tenor. Yeah, so it's a bit like I think those of you remember Concorde and picture that one taking off. The thing's on the runway and he's going along. You've got to get the nose up first, yeah, and up quickly. So the tail's still down there. So it's getting those trebles up. Yeah, and once the nose is up, then and it's the same if you think Concorde coming into land. You bring in the back wheels down first. Yeah, they get down, and then right at the end, bring the nose in. Yeah, so you'll find if you're on a front bell, the last coil or two will come in pretty swift, just as it would go out in the rise as well. The point at which you'll clock up a lot of faults in a competition is the top of the rise. Like I said, you're in Egg Buckland just then. you can either get the bells up so quick as you can, because obviously, you know, a rise could be costly. But the point at which they just settle into top ringing, that's notoriously tricky to, you know, that's where they can wobble a bit and go a bit too high, bring them down a bit low, settle in. So that's a point where you clock up a lot of faults often. The lower, on the other hand, you come down, you know, you want to come down nice and steady. I think the aircraft analogy is a pretty good one, really. But you listen to particularly an 8-bell lower, you know, really coming down gradually. It's a wonderful thing. And there was another, well, it was the old Tavistock captain. He's still with us. I went to see him, was it last year, I think. And his son is a good friend of mine, Robin Burnham, and he's still down in Tavistock. And I remember he sent me a letter there and wrote me one once, and he said an old ringer there, Aaron Tucker, I think, when Robin used to ring at St. Petr's, Dartmouth.
I'm sorry about the technical issues you seem to be having. Don't know if John will be back or not. Can I just wait to see if John manages to return?
Right.
Oh, hi, John. If people want to get any questions ready, whilst we're seeing if John will
and that has led to problems. This is a downside, perhaps, of some of the Devon Call Change towers. You know, everybody, that if a ringer didn't turn up, well, they wouldn't ring. You know, or if, you know, when they start to lose one, perhaps a tower could quickly go silent. You know, if you through not training up a ringers, because the side was so set. You know, so that has been a downside, you know. And you go around some of these towers and you see the old certificates of old, and, you know, they've had good teams in the past, but they haven't brought anybody on, you know. And I can think across the North Taunton, the great North Taunton, and it can be a bit of a sorry sight there at times. You know, you go across there in the past, they've had wonderful sides, but then one or two started to die out, and they just pulled one in, perhaps from a little bit further away, and then a little bit further still, you know. And it got to the stage, I can remember, you know, North Taunton, you know, I mean, Mervyn Way, legend. And he's over Chorley Way, I think, and, you know, then old Bill Follen, dead and gone, he was over to Bondley, and well, I think Chris Clayton, dead and gone, he was up Sanford Court, you know. So it got further, you started splicing in folks, and then if you're not bringing them through, you know, we all know what happens. So that has been one of the downsides of Devon Call Change ringing, I have to say. Another upside of it, and going back to Egg Buckland again, I mean, there's a lot of families with lots of ringers in. You know, the Egg Buckland was largely the Trout family. And they had a bit of a fallout. I think I can say that because they didn't listen. But there's so many of them. But anyway, now some of them ringed a short prior, and then you got all the Pascoes over Widdicombe Way and that, and Buckland in the Moor. It used to be old Pickles Pascoe. He proper old school there. I remember him coming out Chagford. You know, in a lot of my young ringing days, I got a lot to thank for the old Buckland in the Moor team. Wonderful 8-bell side. You know, but, you know, they'd shout and holler to you, you know, if you didn't do it right. And then who else we got? Well, I'm going to finish off with another one in a minute, just down the river from us, which is the Charland family down Dunsford. So yeah, it's common, you know, when you got it in the family to have a good many family members. I mean, I have to say, you know, from my own perspective, it's quite handy having one or two in the family ringing under the current circumstances, because we can get around the bloody old rigmarole of distancing, can't we? So, you know, I mean, a common one where I'm doing at the moment with 3 family members stuck in the middle, we got an 8, and I'm doing 1 3 4 5 1 3 4 5 7, so I can stick one front and back with a distance. And for any musicians amongst your piano players, just go to the keyboard and find an E flat, and it's the black notes from E flat upwards, the 5 black notes, and it's a minor pentatonic scale, which is basically the blues scale by another name, and it makes some lovely music, but very different from what you're used to.
John, I hope you okay if we take a couple of questions now?
Yeah, crack on. Yeah,
I'm just contemplating about time. Simon, you've had your hand up for
I've got a question.
Am I looking here? Oh, there's Simon. Yeah, I've seen
Yeah,
your name. I know your name somewhere.
A key thing about your chord change ringing is the focus on striking, isn't it? Striking is the be all and end all, at the expense of complexity. Exactly. Whereas in method ringing, we tend to see chord changes as a stepping stone, and as soon as you've got chord changes, we rip the rug from under your feet and push you into plain hunt, and the striking goes from adequate downwards, at the start at least. Do you think there's benefit to us of focusing on chord change as a means to it, as the end point, and really just focusing on striking rather than moving up? What do we have to learn about striking from your style?
I'm going to be really controversial here. Oh, well, I don't know if I am or no, but I'm going to say chord changes with open hand stroke leads. No, in a word. But you focus on a really interesting point, and I think John Izzo actually made this as well when he was saying in his, somewhere I've read it somewhere. To me, and then again we'll probably blame the Victorians for this one, can't we? But to me, chord change ringing should be kept separate. I mean, I like the idea, again, if I was trying going from method ringing, this kaleidoscope thing that I've seen about that, focusing on the idea, the components of scientific ringing, your dodging, your placemaking and that. Chord change ringing is a different thing to me altogether, and I don't see that chord change ringing actually helps as a stepping stone towards ringing methods. So I would propose that you go down this, like I said, this kaleidoscope, all that sort of thing, practicing those components, but treat chord change ringing, yes, as an art in itself, focusing on striking. Like I said, it's my personal preference. I don't actually like to hear rung with an open hand stroke, but then that opens up the whole can of worms about rope handling and pulling and everything. But definitely, I mean, I think to use it as, if you like to focus on listening, definitely, use it as an end in itself. Definitely, yes.
And John, sorry, what would you advise bands to do then if they were if they wanted to pursue that as Simon's described?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Really. I mean, keep it simple. Don't be afraid. I don't mind, with our ringers, leaving it in rounds for a long time, and I would, even call the first chord change. You want them settled. I want to hear rounds rung. I want to hear the rhythm. It's all about rhythm. Rhythm is key in any music. I mean, I got a little quote from Stravinsky stuff in an R tower about rhythm. Rhythm is key. So yeah, whether if you're ringing it with an open hand stroke rig, but really focus on the rhythm. We often say down here, and it's I tell my ringers, ring to the rhythm. You emphasizing the whole thing about the feeling of the rope, because ultimately when you're learning to ring, you most of the time you can't see what's going on up above you. I have been in a 4-bell tower where you can see them above through the holes in the floor, but basically all you've got between you and that up there is that bit of rope, and what you can feel through the rope is really important. First and foremost, what you feel the way the bell is swinging, feel and ring with the rhythm, with the swing of the bell. The feeling is key, and I think because rhythm ultimately, you really want to get it in here, don't you? You think about, don't mean a thing ain't got no swing, but if you're drumming in a samba band or something like that, a similar sort of thing, you've got to really internalize that rhythm. It's rhythm. Yeah.
Thanks, John. There's a question from Chris in the chat box, and Chris asks, there seem to be lots of named Devon Call Change compositions, but I cannot find out what they are, i.e. what the calling rules are. Are these written down, or is it by local tradition?
Sorry, I've just looked to the right of my screen and seen Chris Duckett, and I've got to say hello, Chris Duckett there, am I? Yeah, God. Still the beard, still there. Good. Well done. Yeah, this is a sad thing. The late John Scott commented on this. You know, we got lots of peels down here, and you go around a lot of Call Change towers, and you see the peels written on the cards gathering dust. Which is a real shame. Nowadays, it's almost exclusively a 6-bell competition, 60 on thirds, which is a real shame. 8-bell competition, queens, and it's almost gotten into a rut, which is a real shame. I mean, I love the Whittingtons on 8. I think I love that. You know, but again, you know, we've got other peels here. I mean, I wrote one here for back in '94 for the Stannery celebrations down here, and then I got a lovely old letter here from somebody else from the past. And I done got a date for it, unfortunately, but it was somebody. This is following 52 cross changes composed by J.S. Searle in Torrington in 1935. You know, it's a shame that we don't ring more than that, but it's 60 on thirds, and you know, you find that you don't have to look very hard to find that. The same with the queens on 8. You know, you get the bells and the queens in Devon competition ringing. There's no set way of you won't get disqualified if you put them into queens one way or another. You know, I prefer to leave the front bells in rounds at the top half and move the back bells around, rather than sort of putting them in sort of moving 6, 7, 4, 5, 2, 3. I leave the 2, 3 one, just let them settle down a little around the back first. But thereafter, it's, you know, the usual thing. You're moving the bell back that's led, so that until it comes back around the front again. And that's a sort of common format of Devon ringing, and you get them into a pattern, and then, you know, either hunt the treble up and down in between, you know, making the changes. Our good colleague down the river from Chegford, and Drew Stainton down in Dunsford next door, Martin Charland. I'll always like Martin calling, because he, you know, he's not afraid to mix things up a bit and call other stuff. You know, even something like Grants or doubles, but as a Devon Call Change peel. I mean, in the past, again, that's another thing you don't see so much now, but in the past, we've done Devon Call Change ringing, actually ringing double changes on 6 or even triple changes on 8. Of course, you've got to have a good caller to do that. And I think the last time I did that was on the old agricultural 8 over the curtain. Paul Pascoe, again, a name you'll know, who's a Devon ringer that went to the dark side, if you like, not ringers to come out of Devon, I would say, but having him calling, you know, triple call changes on a good agricultural 8, and we had some good ringers there doing it, you know, and it was lovely. But again, we haven't done so much of that now. Perhaps, you know, a lot of the experience is gone, which is a real shame. But basically, at the moment, like I say, 60 on thirds and queens is what you're going to be up against.
Super. Thanks, John. Any other questions? There's nothing else in the chat box at the moment, but if anyone wants to raise their hands. Alison, you've unmuted yourself. I don't know if that means you want to speak or.
Yeah, if I may, Arthur.
Yes, of course.
Lovely talk, John, and great insight into Devon call change ringing, which I love participating in and struggled on occasions. Following on a little bit from Simon's question first, you mentioned that it's a very different style of handling the bell and use switch when you're coming up into the real part of the world, rather than down in Devon, or perhaps I should say when you're in the real part of the world, come up to our part of the world. How important is it to actually do the different handling if we were to do more of this outside Devon and Cornwall?
Truth be told, not essential. I mean, I don't want to get into it, especially when I know one of our ringers is on here somewhere. I'm sure. I was going to say, but you know, many of our lady ringers will not be running the rope through their hands. But not just them, you know, because nowadays, truth be told, there's a lot of peel ringers now have come over, you know, you'll find them ringing in the competitions, you know, that since the days that Exeter Cathedral invited into the Devon 8-bell and that, you know, so it's no surprise if the Cathedral are ringing, you got Matt Hillings in there ringing. And on an interesting point, I'm going to say, okay, it's my turn to get one back in on you. The 12-bell in Exeter Cathedral. Oh yeah, of course, I wonder who won that. But but it was no surprise to me that Ian Fielding, wasn't it, rung the tenor, one Grandison on the Exeter Peel. Now, Ian and Jenny Sparlin, another one that I went to uni with actually in Brum. Ian, and Jenny, you'll see them out on the competition circuit. So Ian had all that experience of learning how to ring a tenor properly. So I think that's why Exeter put St Martin's off the perch, I think. But no, you don't have to handle it like that. But I would say on the rise and the rise and the lower, it is a major advantage to run the rope, because that to really handle the rope as you want it, to get that end to stay up there and to keep that sally pushing in. Okay, so I would say it is a big advantage, and I've said to our ringers, even when I'm training, I said, yeah, don't make no odds to me if you don't run the rope, when you're up top ringing, but it's real advantage if you can do it, when you're rising and lowering. I mean, that could bring us on to another thing about which way you train, from the top or from the bottom. And obviously the two traditions, I learned from the bottom upwards. I mean, it's common to learn to ring off the stay, the two separate ways. I actually learned a lot in Brum, and I tend to do a bit of a mix and match. So I approach it from both ways, but learning to ring the bell up right from the beginning to us is obviously key.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Alison. Ollie Buckley.
I've got Ollie, but he's not. He's muted still.
Yeah. Ollie, yes, unmute yourself. Yeah.
I got you there now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a basic question. How are the calls made? Are they made at the hand stroke before? And do you call up or down?
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned it, because I omitted, my bad. I omitted to say about calling. Just on a little thought, often further west you go, I can't remember which are cardinal numbers and which are ordinal numbers, but sort of West Devon, Cornwall, you would expect to hear more 1 to 2, 2 to 3. Perhaps a bit further over this way, second to third, treble to third, like that. So there's slightly difference in the way, actually calling them. Calling up or down, I always say, well, the way we do it is calling them sideways, because it's the two bells that change. So again, that's I when I was up in Brum, we had there must have been a district meeting at Edgbaston once, and I remember hearing this calling down thing, and it was all Greek to me. But then somebody else come and called them, and they called them about 3 different ways, and it was like the one change, but it was being called 3 different ways, which was great, but it totally confused me. I'm sure it might have helped somebody who was learning, but yes, it's call it on the sally, and then the change is made on the next sally. And the classic thing is, of course, the change is called, and this is where faults will be picked up, or learners learning ringing changes. They start, as soon as they hear the change called, the next end, they start, if they're cutting in, they start driving the end down. But no, it's waiting to make the change on the following sally. Yeah. And this frequency of calling, well, depends on the situation, depends, what you're trying to do, a competition or whatever. You can sometimes, perhaps in a competition, you'll find the treble ringer, maybe if they're calling the treble back when they're coming back down to the front, you might call it every other one, or perhaps, or delay it a little bit more. It depends on a lot of things. And if the bells are rocking a little bit, you might just want to let them set there. So yet again, it's not set in stone.
Super. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ollie. Just before we finish up, I'm just going to, before we properly thank John for his time tonight and for such an engaging talk, just 2 quick notices from me. Next Wednesday, we're joined by Richard Pullin, who is going to talk about some notable composers, particularly with Birmingham links from the past. So please join us 7 o'clock next Wednesday for that. Richard wrote some really interesting articles in the ringing world. So, I think it'd be a really engaged and interesting historical talk. Secondly, for a couple of people who have joined us from outside of the guild, you're very, very welcome. I have set up an email list just for the Wednesday night talk. So if you're interested, if you're not a guild member, but you want to find out about the talks on a regular basis, just send us a quick email on the, I've just put it in the chat box, smgcb@gmail.com, and I'll add you to that mailing list. You won't get all the rubbish we send, not rubbish, the other stuff we send out, but you will get information about the talks. So if you're interested in that, please send us a quick email. Otherwise, John, I just wanted, on behalf of the guild, to thank you for tonight's tonight's talk. I think it's been a really interesting insight into such an exciting and different feature of ringing, tradition of ringing. I like the comparisons to folklore and jazz singers. It's made it a really interesting insight, something I hadn't really thought about. So on behalf of St Martin's Guild, thank you very much for your time in preparing tonight's talk and for coming along talking to us.
Not at all. My pleasure. I don't know if we've got a minute or two that I could just finish. We started with a rise. I could finish with a few changes and a lower, which is our friends just down the river, like I say, down to Dunsford. 5 of the 6 ringers you'll hear are all the Charlin family. Uncle Dick is now dead and gone, unfortunately. But just before we go, the years I was up in Brum, and this is left in '97, and I don't suppose I don't know if he's alive still, but I remember going over to Castle Bromwich there one night because I tried clocking all the towers, obviously, while I was up there. And when I rung it up, I said, "Can we come over to have a ring?" And I heard this voice on the other end, and he started chanting. He said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I said, Jackford." I listened to the bloke. I thought, "Cool, bugger." I thought he sounds like he comes from Denway. And then and I said, "Where do you come from?" He said, "Lustley." I said, "Well, how long you been up there?" He said, "Oh, about 35 years or something." I think it was Bill Sanders. Was it Richard Jones would probably know. I think was it Bill Sanders. I think anyway. I think he came from Lustley. But we went there. Of course, we did a bit of Devon ringing on these bells, and I don't know if they've been redone, but Castle Bromwich was a bit of a roughy old set, and we were bringing these changes. And I think he was Bill. I think he was cool. He said he had some young boys there. He was training up, and we did our stuff, and they loved it. And I always remember, "Oh, can we ring some of them fast school changes again?" He was going. But they loved it. Yeah, they loved that. But that was one that stuck in my time up there. Yeah. Anyway,
I think it'd be really appropriate end, John, to end with.
I think so. Lovely, yeah. Anyway, I'll give you a bit of Dunsford. It comes in a few changes, so you hear some changes first, and then they'll go into the lower. This is a lovely set of bells down Dunsford, by the way. Yeah, we're worth going to ring. Yeah.
Thank you, John. That's a really nice way to end the meeting. Please have a look in the chat box. There's a couple of thanks for you. Got a lot of thanks for you, and a promise for our young ringers who are going to give Devon Call Changes a go. So inspirational talk.
Great stuff.
All right. Thanks ever so much, John.
Thank you, Oliver.
All right, and goodbye, everyone. Hopefully see you. See most
Thank you
next
all
week.
very much, and lovely to see one or two familiar faces. I'm looking at Chris right now, and Richard. Thank you. Great, lovely, wonderful.
Super. Thank you ever so much.